What's up, guys? Welcome back to Horsepower Obsessed. Thanks for pressing play. Today we are going to discuss the C8 Corvette ZR1 thanks to an article found over at the mid-engine-corvette-forum.com. And it contains some really juicy bits of information about the future of the C8 Corvette and all of the future performance variants coming very soon. So let's jump right into it now. Alright guys, so like I said, this information is coming to us from our friends over at the mid-engine-corvette-forum.com. You can find a wealth of knowledge on Corvette stuff over there, specifically the C8 Corvette knowledge, and it is an awesome place to be if you're a Corvette guy, and everyone there is very helpful. This article is titled, Very Interesting C8 ZR1 Article Thanks to Wheels Magazine. So, Wheels Magazine just so happens to be a magazine that is apparently published overseas, in Australia specifically, and it has some information for us. Now, some of this information has been stuff we have talked about in the past, which is the only reason I decided to make a video of this, because a lot of this stuff is basically being confirmed. I want to say basically being confirmed because there is no such thing as being 100% confirmed until GM acknowledges any of this information. But with this info continuously coming up and continuously being cited from different sources, that tells me there is very likely some truth to it. The exact same thing happened whenever the base C8 was still being rumored, being tested, and GM hadn't said anything official yet. All of the information coming in was constantly being repeated from different sources, and it all ended up being 100% correct. So I feel this is likely to be the same situation, but as always with any kind of leak or rumored information, you definitely want to take them with a grain of salt. With that said, we get some new pictures of the ZR1 and it looks absolutely fantastic. If this car comes out and looks just like that, I am seeing absolutely no problem with the future of the C8 Corvette performance variants because they look awesome. Now on the mid-engine-corvette-forum.com, the article starts out by saying, info on the E-Ray Z06 and more. Nice renditions. Thank you to Australia's Wheels magazine. And it goes on to the very first page of this Wheels magazine. This is what it looks like on the cover. And again, we're seeing a very, very attractive rendering of the ZR1 in C8 form, and the biggest text here says, Chevy's V8 all-paw Ferrari fryer gets set to rip. But will it make it to Australia, basically? Before we go any further, guys, if you could please go ahead and smash that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification just so you don't miss any uploads like this, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps me and YouTube both know what you guys like to see so we can continue to put out content for you that you are interested in viewing. The second page actually goes on to say that the Chevy Corvette C8 is arriving in the fourth quarter of 2021 as a right-hand drive option for Australia. That's pretty cool. This hasn't been something that Chevy has done in the past, and for our friends over the pond, congratulations, because you're actually going to be able to get a genuine factory-produced right-hand drive version of the Corvette versus having to pay a lot of money to have it converted. Now, with that said, their price is also a lot higher, and that is $150,000. No matter how you cut it, that is a lot more expensive than what it costs here in the US. On to page 3 of this particular magazine, we get another view of what the ZR1 could potentially look like in C8 form, and again, it is very, very glorious. Now, the biggest difference from the C7 Corvette Z06 to the C7 Corvette ZR1 was, of course, carbon fiber, and this picture is no exception. We get an entire carbon fiber roof all the way down to the rear view camera. It's all carbon fiber, and then, of course, we have a giant spoiler on the back of the car that is also carbon fiber, and even a diffuser at the bottom that appears to also be carbon fiber. Now, what's really cool about this is obviously you can see in the center of that carbon fiber diffuser is in fact the exhaust tips. Now, we have seen a bunch of spy shots showing one of the C8 Corvettes running around with a center exiting exhaust. And there have been some people speculating that that could possibly be the ZR1 and not the Z06. Now, as you guys know, there's been a huge debate online as to whether or not the C8 Z06 is going to be turbocharged or naturally aspirated. I have heard both sides of that argument. And one of the biggest reasons why that argument exists is because the C8 Corvette has been spotted running around in camo, and people are just assuming it's the Z06 when it could possibly be the ZR1. And if it's the ZR1, it is going to be turbocharged, whereas the Z06 is probably not going to be. But Anytime we get any of these spy shots, everybody just assumes that the car we're looking at is the Z06 because that is likely to be the next released C8, but there is a good chance they are testing all of these cars together and really throwing us off. So with that said, these center exiting exhaust tips for the ZR1 are not a complete unlikely thing to happen, and honestly, it looks really freaking good with that giant diffuser. Moving down to the next page of the magazine article, it starts talking about the Corvette ZR1. Even before the mid-engine Corvette C8 lands in Australia, Chevrolet has big plans for future variants, culminating with the new twin-turbo V8 powered ZR1 and ZORA models delivering Ferrari belting performance. Overseas-based former Wheels editor Angus McKenzie tells all. So this is the person who supposedly has some sort of inside knowledge about this car setup and decided they wanted to go ahead and leak the information to us. So let's dive into it. The next page has a lot of text on it and a lot of different topics and a lot of different points. So what I'm going to do is kind of sum it up into some of the more important bits. Of course, I'm going to post the entire page up here for you guys to read on your own if you'd like to read everything, but I'm going to go over it and kind of pull out the bits that are the most important in my opinion. It starts off by basically saying that the mid-engine Corvette is more than 50 years in the making. Of course, we already know that. ZORA wanted the mid-engine Corvette to happen a lot earlier than it did. He wanted this to happen because the mid-engine setup was, in his opinion, the right place to be to optimize handling and aerodynamics. And so far, the C8 Corvette has not disappointed in this aspect. It goes on to say that GM is about to make the most of the mid-engine platform by adding 4 new C8 Corvette variants, the E-Ray, the Z06, the ZR1, and ultimately the ZORA, each faster and more powerful than the current car. And they'll be rolled out over the next 2 to 4 years. 2 of them are actually hybrids with all-wheel drive. One will have a naturally aspirated quad-cam V8 that reportedly revs to 9,000 RPM. 2 will have turbocharged engines, and one of those is rumored to punch through the 1,000 horsepower barrier. Now again, this is stuff we have heard multiple times before, and I personally know I have reported on this same exact number multiple times before the base C8 Corvette was even officially announced. So again, when you continuously hear the same news over and over from different sources, it tells me there is very likely a lot of truth to it. So there is a really good chance the ZORA model of the C8 Corvette is going to have 1,000 horsepower. It's going to have a hybrid assisted front wheel drive motor. It's going to have all-wheel drive. It's going to have all of this stuff because it is consistently being reported from different sources. The article goes on to say that the C8 Corvette E-Ray is the only new vet variant that will have a 6.2 liter pushrod V8 that powers the base model. But there's a twist. It's basically going to have the 6.2 liter V8 as well as the front hybrid drive motor that obviously powers the front wheels, giving it all-wheel drive and a total system output close to 590 horsepower. The E-Ray will effectively take over the role of the Grand Sport and will be comfortable enough to use as a daily driver. The E-Ray's chassis tune will not therefore be overly hardcore. So just like I reported in my previous video, the E-Ray is going to have more power, all-wheel drive. It's probably going to be a hair heavier than the base model, but it's not going to be tuned for the track. So that's where the Z06 is going to come in with a lot of track performance, such as stiffer suspensions, more aerodynamics, wider tires, things of that nature. This article goes on to again say something that I reported on in the previous video, that is going to be that the E-Ray will accelerate to 60 quicker than the C8 Corvette Z06 will. The article then goes on to say that the C8 Corvette Z06 will be powered by a high-revving dual overhead camshaft V8, making it the first Corvette since the C4 ZR1 to have an engine without push rods. The C8 Z06's engine is closely related to the Cadillac's all-new 4.2-liter Blackwing engine and will be built on the same assembly line, but while the Cadillac version of the Blackwing engine has a hot V twin-turbo setup, the Z06, rumored to be good for about 615 horsepower, is naturally aspirated with completely different cylinder heads and a flat plane crank. Now again, this is something we've talked about in the past. There was a lot of discussion originally that the C8 Z06 Z06 was going to use the Blackwing engine directly, but Cadillac came right out and said, no, that's not happening. The Blackwing engine is specific for the Cadillac and it will not be shared with any other GM car. This is the way that they can continue to say that. Even though the C8 Corvette Z06's engine is going to share a lot of Blackwing traits, it's not the exact same engine, so it doesn't have to be directly shared, and Cadillac can easily say without lying that that engine is not being shared amongst different GM cars. The article then says, why the flat plane crank? The technical explanation is that the smaller and lighter flat plane crank allows the engine to rev faster and higher and thus make more power. Flat plane crank V8s also have different firing order that allows for better exhaust scavenging, the reflected pressure waves helping suck the burnt gases out of the combustion chamber. But Detroit sources say that once GM became aware of Ford's much hyped 5.2-liter Voodoo flat plane crank V8 built to power the GT350 and GT350R Mustangs, the old Detroit rivalries kicked in and it was decided the performance Corvettes had to go flat plane crank engine too. The Z06 engine is said to be a screamer, capable of revving to 9,000 RPM, and will be the world's most powerful naturally aspirated V8, but of course there are downsides. While the V8s equipped with regular cross-plane cranks are naturally balanced due to their firing order, flat-plane crank V8s have only half of their vibrations canceled out naturally. The bigger the engine, the higher the revs, the worse the vibrations, as Ford has found to its cost. On the next page, we get some more renderings of the ZR1 C8 Corvette, again looking really fantastic, showing some nice carbon ceramic rotors with some nice looking wheels finally. We get, of course, that front splitter, the side skirts, the big wing in the back, a larger opening on the side for additional cooling / air to the engine, and some dive planes up front that we've seen in previous spy shots. On the front hood, there's also some air intakes that will likely really only be there for providing downforce. And the front bumper has an opening in the front where on the base C8 now it is all closed off. Again, probably for added cooling and downforce. Further down that particular page, we get to see a front rendering of the car, again looking very good. A lot of the same stuff is visible from the front here, except for now we can see the seats on the inside and the steering wheel obviously on the right because this is an Australian magazine. Moving on to the next page, we get to see a little bit more of the rear end along with the wheels and the spoiler or wing in this case. And again, it is all looking very good. Halfway down that page, we have a text break that says 3 things you should know. Number 1 is the chassis. Upgraded suspension will feature a more performance-focused tune of the base C8's magnetic ride control suspension. Combined with wider wheels, grippier tires, and vastly superior aero, it will take performance into AMG Black Series territory. Brakes will switch to monster carbon ceramics clamped by 10 pot calipers. That is gigantic, guys. So basically, the C7 Corvette ZR1 with 755 horsepower has a 6-piston caliper in the front or a 6-pot caliper in the front. If they bump that up 4 more pistons, you are talking about some serious clamping force. Now, that is only really needed if you have an extremely heavy car or a car with a lot of horsepower, and I'm thinking we're going to get the latter here. Number 2 is going to be the engine. The new 5.5-liter twin-turbo V8 will have a dual overhead cam and 4 valves per cylinder. Dubbed the LT7, it will produce about 700 horsepower and about 850 pound-feet of torque in the ZR1. The ZORA badged flagship will kick this into previously uncharted territory for a Corvette using front motor electric assist for a total of 1,000 horsepower and about 1,000 pound-feet of torque as well. At the end of that page, it says the ZR1 will provide vastly upgraded aero and offer the option of carbon fiber wheels, and it's not even the Alpha Dog Corvette. Now that part is really interesting considering we have seen some of these carbon fiber wheels for sale online months ago, and we all just assumed it was for the Corvette Z06, but now it's sounding like those wheels were specifically for the ZR1. Just another reason why the 2 cars we've seen testing around certain states are not necessarily both Z06s. The next page talks a little bit more about the C8 Corvette Z06 and about the fact it is going to offer carbon ceramic brakes and maybe possibly carbon fiber wheels, but there's a better chance those are going to be reserved for the ZR1. It's also going to get a different aero package, different rear bodywork, and it's going to be wider in the rear to accommodate a wider rear tire, as well as having a more track-oriented suspension. The C8 ZR1 will also get the wide body rear end, not just because of the revised rear suspension and bigger rear wheels and tires it will share with the Z06, but also because it can accommodate the extra plumbing and intercoolers required for its 2 turbochargers. The turbos, which will be mounted on either side of the engine, are expected to boost the output to about 800 horsepower. The C8 version of the ZR1 will follow tradition of delivering muscular shock and awe thrust when you nail the accelerator pedal, but the ZR1 badge will no longer designate the most powerful Corvette in the lineup. The Alpha Dog C8 will be badged the ZORA in honor of the legendary Corvette chief engineer. What the ZORA C8 Corvette is going to have is the same twin-turbo quad-cam V8 from the C8 Corvette ZR1 with the E-Race front axle-mounted E-motor, putting the total system output close to 1,000 horsepower, which is absolutely insane, but it's something we've heard a couple different times. Now just one additional mention of it from an additional source, proving it is very likely to be true. That, of course, is going to make the ZORA Corvette the most powerful one ever built by far. And the article compares it to a couple other insanely fast cars like the Porsche 911 Turbo S or the Ferrari's SF90. So yeah, if it's able to match either one of those two, then we are in for one heck of a treat. So there you have it, guys. The article has given us a lot of information about these cars, a lot of stuff we've heard in the past as well, which is just another reconfirmation that we are very likely to get some of these things. I will, of course, link to this particular thread at the Mid-Engine Corvette Forum.com down in the description below, so if you want to read it for yourself, have at it. But that is going to do it for today's video, guys. So if you liked what you saw, give me a big thumbs up. If you have any questions about the content or what we are talking about here today, leave them in the comment section down below or shoot me an email, and I will be happy to get you an answer. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'm going to have loads of C8 Corvette news like this coming you are not going to want to miss. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next upload.